Alright, let's talk about 7 foods that seriously mess with the kidneys. The kidneys are pretty amazing. Each one has around a million tiny filters, called nephrons, and these filters have the job of getting rid of the bad stuff while holding on to the good stuff. With those 2 million nephrons, the kidneys filter about 50 gallons of blood every single day. Pretty wild, right? And out of all that blood, they recycle about 99% of it, so only a tiny bit gets released. But here's the thing. One of the biggest issues the kidneys face is high blood pressure. Chronic high blood pressure can totally wreck those little filters. Another even worse thing for the kidneys is high sugar levels, like in diabetes. All that sugar in the blood has to pass through those filters, and what happens is that it actually makes the filters smaller, so they can't do their job properly anymore. When this happens, sugar and protein might start appearing in urine. So, how do you know if the kidneys might be damaged? A couple of simple signs are: 1. Is there sugar in the urine? And 2. Is there protein in the urine? If these are present, it could mean kidney damage. Also, pay attention to the color of the urine. Normally, it should be a nice amber yellow. If the kidneys aren't working right, the urine color can change, sometimes turning darker, or even a whole bunch of different colors. One of the most important things the kidneys do is activate vitamin D. If they're damaged, they won't be able to activate it properly, and that could explain why some people have serious vitamin D deficiencies. Healthy kidneys are needed to get rid of waste, and also to hold on to nutrients that the body needs. So, let's talk about some foods that should really be avoided. First up, instant noodles, like ramen. They're packed with sodium, but there's something else in them that's actually even worse. It's a preservative called TBHQ. This stuff is super toxic to the kidneys. It can make the kidneys work overtime, making them enlarge, and in some cases, it could even lead to kidney cancer. Sodium is definitely a problem when it comes to blood pressure. Reducing sodium might be recommended, but it's also important to consider increasing potassium, which is more protective. Too much sodium is a problem, but so is having too little. For example, there's a condition called hyponatremia, where people drink too much water but don't get enough salt. This can cause fluid retention in the body, putting extra strain on the kidneys. Just drinking a ton of water without electrolytes can actually stress out the kidneys too. It's better to drink when thirsty, and don't force drinking tons of water if not thirsty. And anytime salt is consumed, always go for sea salt. Next, Skittles, or anything like them that has a bunch of artificial food dyes. These dyes are really hard on the kidneys. The kidneys have to work extra hard to get rid of them. At first, they try to recycle all that dye, but it just keeps going through the bloodstream over and over again, and that's not desirable. Then there's fried chicken, especially the kind from fast food joints. It's cooked in seed oils at really high temperatures, and when protein is heated with carbs, like all that breading on the chicken, glycation happens. So, what's glycation? Well, protein and carbohydrate bind together under high heat. When that happens, a sugar molecule gets stuck to the protein. The protein can't do its job anymore and becomes pretty much useless. For example, when testing for diabetes using something called A1C, the amount of glucose stuck to the protein in the blood is measured. High A1C levels mean there's a lot of sugar stuck to proteins, which can cause complications. This is especially bad in the kidneys, because proteins become clogged and everything stops working properly. So, eating fried food is like clogging up the kidneys with all that junk. Next, let's talk about commercial bread, the kind that lasts for weeks without going bad. It stays soft, even long after it should be stale. That's because it has preservatives and also contains something called potassium bromate. This stuff is really harmful to the kidneys, and in fact, it's banned in many countries, except for the US and Japan. It's also considered carcinogenic, especially for kidney cancer. Next up is soda. What's in soda that's bad for the kidneys? First, there's phosphoric acid, which is really harmful. But it's not just the acid, it's also the added sugar. And diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney damage. Diabetes happens when there's too much sugar in the blood, and soda has sugar in it. Phosphoric acid is added because it's cheaper than other acids. It helps preserve the soda, keeps the carbonation, and enhances the flavor. Now, let's talk about agave syrup. Some say it's even keto-friendly, but that's just not true. 80% of agave syrup is fructose, which is even worse than high fructose corn syrup, which has about 55% fructose. Agave syrup has up to 90% fructose, and the body metabolizes fructose differently. It goes straight to the liver, which stresses it out. The metabolism of fructose is similar to alcohol, creating insulin resistance, which is the precursor to prediabetes and diabetes. Since diabetes is the #1 cause of chronic kidney disease, agave nectar is one of the worst things for the kidneys. Finally, cereals, especially instant cereals. They're full of seed oils, refined sugars, and refined starches. But the worst part? Glyphosate. It's not listed as an ingredient because legally it doesn't have to be, but bioengineered ingredients on the label usually mean it contains glyphosate. In areas where glyphosate is heavily used in farming, workers in the fields have a much higher risk of chronic kidney disease due to this exposure. Even non-GMO grains like oats and wheat can have glyphosate on them because it's used to dry them out during processing. So, even though they're not GMO, they can still be contaminated with glyphosate. The next question is, what should be eaten to improve kidney health? We will cover it in another video. Thanks for watching.